here, and I just want to explain a little bit about what, I think people know, but I'll just say it again. My name is Beena Sarwar. I'm a journalist from Pakistan, and I was here for a couple of years in the last decade, and I moved back to Cambridge for personal reasons and also because I like it, but not because I wanted to leave Pakistan. Actually, that's true. I did not. But Sanjay and I met in 2012 in Karachi at the social media mela that was organized by somebody very dear to both of us, and her name was Beena Sarwar. She was a very personal friend of mine who I had known for a long time, and Sanjay met her at that social media mela. And Sabine, as many of you might know, was shot dead a couple of years ago. And but somehow she brought so many people together at that event, at that social media event in Karachi. And so we've stayed in touch. Sanjay and I have stayed in touch since then. And when Sanjay said he was coming for this India conference, and he said we got to meet, and I said, of course we have to meet. But then I was like, I felt a bit guilty having him to myself, so I thought, Sanjay, you can't not share.
Yeah. What do they say?
I just wanted to share him with people.
I'm shareable.
And Sanjay was literally arrived last night. Got him from the airport, took him to Subdrift, Boston, where he gave a brilliant stand-up thing for 5 minutes. Some of you were there. And he was at the Me Too panel at the India conference today. And then we were having a discussion here. And then he's had a performance later. And of course, he has not slept. And I said to him, and he's leaving tomorrow morning back to India. So somebody said, this is crazy. And I said, yes, but that's Sanjay. So it fits in perfectly well. So I have been involved with India, Pakistan, with the people-to-people dialogue between India and Pakistan since the mid-1990s, when I was a young journalist starting out. And when I came back to here to Harvard, not to Harvard, to Cambridge, some students at the Kennedy School were starting the South Asia Engagement Group. And so they actually wanted to start an India-Pakistan group. And Kennedy School said to them, why do you need an India-Pakistan group? You've got an India forum, you've got a Pakistan forum. They said, yes, that's why we need an India-Pakistan group. But in the end, they ended up making it a South Asia Engagement Forum, which is now the South Asia Engagement Group. And that is how we got this room. And so we're just going to have a conversation, and I would just like everybody who chimes in to say, introduce themselves a little bit, and it's just a conversation, a discussion. And as you know, just as we are starting this, as this whole thing happened, I don't know if it came up in the India conference at all, this Kashmir, what happened, the thing. So the media hype on both sides is so strong, more so in India, I have to say, but in Pakistan also there are the newspaper headlines that Indians find inflammatory are being used in India to rile up more sentiment against Pakistan, and this is becoming a really flashpoint issue between the two countries, which are nuclear armed, as everybody knows. So it's something that really is clouding, is hanging over us right now. And I know that Sanjay, this is something he's been concerned with as well. And we are both, as you all know, and I think probably most of you are in the same boat. I'm considered a traitor in Pakistan because I talk about peace with India. Sanjay is considered a traitor in India because he's talk about peace with Pakistan.
No, I'm perhaps the only person who was picked up by cops in 3 different countries. Who went to jail in 3 different countries. I went to jail in America.
But that was ki wajah.
Yeah, but
the reasons
were different. I was picked up by cops in India. I was picked up by cops in Pakistan. So there's a dialogue in Hindi. Don को पकड़ना. Don का इंतजार 4 मिनटों की पुलिस कर रही है. मेरा 3 की तो करीब ही है.
So I started a hashtag on Twitter, which is hashtag Traitors of the World Unite.
Yeah. Except that I'm now increasingly becoming a traitor to the entire world. I think I've come to realize that it has given more power to my comedy. I've come to realize that no matter how hard you try, this planet is doomed because of humans. Yeah. We keep on harping about Kashmir or nuclear weapons and this and that, but look at the environment, what we have done to the environment. In the last 60 years, 45 years rather, we have actually made 60% of this species extinct. Right? And I have a huge problem with human beings procreating. Why on earth do you want to crowd this place? It's like a train compartment which is totally jam-packed with people, and you are hoping that some people will get down at the next station. But instead of that, 15 more people jump back.
But we're doing our best to get rid of them, no? By these violence and killing. So we're
But
doing our
my
best.
problem is when we do violence and killings and or even natural deaths. Whenever a human being dies, it should be celebrated. Okay, don't take it as comedy. I'm serious.
No,
with this.
no.
And whenever a human being is born, it should be mourned.
This is very dark and black.
I
This is
am.
totally, and actually that is something that gives a lot of power to your stand-up, to your satirical, to the satire that you do, because it comes from a very dark place. But it's like you said yesterday, there's enough things going on. You don't have to make things up, but it's how you recount it that makes it funny. But what I want to talk about also is that another thing that you are cynical about is democracy.
Yeah.
Because your group is called Aisi Taisi Democracy,
Yeah.
which means
Damn the democracy.
damn democracy. So that is completely not my view at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
And yet, we are in many ways we have similar views, but
Mhm.
in some views we some ways.
But you
we
do
don't.
realize that that name is actually it's satirical,
Yeah.
because Chernowski had said that in democracy everybody has a right to eat in a golden plate.
Mm.
But for that everybody needs to have a golden plate first. Otherwise it's just that statement is just rhetorical. It makes no sense,
No.
right? And democracy these days, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not very well educated in that sense. Democracy these days is for Goldman Sachs. It was for Lehman Brothers. It's for Ambanis and Adanis and Sharifs in your country. What about, the poorest of poor is being alienated even further. And I'm not the only one who's saying this, many people are saying this.
Yeah.
This is not something very unique that I'm saying. It has been said many times, but through my work in comedy, I want to talk about this stuff, and I want to make people, to be ashamed of themselves. In the name of democracy, what else is happening? Look at the democracy in India.
Mm.
If democracy in India and America, two largest democracies, can bring up people like Donald Trump and Narendra Modi, I don't need this democracy.
So I got your point, and I remember when we had elections in Pakistan, and Zardari was the People's Party came in, and Zardari became president or made himself president. I got an email from a journalist in America saying, what kind of elections bring up someone like Zardari, and I replied to him saying, what kind of elections bring up people at that time? It was somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But the point, my view about democracy is a little bit different, and maybe and I know it probably doesn't gel with yours, but I think democracy is a process and not an event. And I think that when the process continues, yes, there are some lows, but then there is a self-correcting mechanism, and the people who have come in now, they are not going to necessarily be there. Unlike dictators, we've had several dictatorships in Pakistan, and when they come in, they don't leave until they are made to leave.
Yeah.
Right? And so in democracy, at least you have that cycle that the people who you bring in who you don't like, they can send out.
Beena, here is where my cynicism comes in.
Yeah.
Like we have a lot of privilege in that sense. Like you live in Boston and you talk about democracy in Pakistan. I have lived in San Francisco for 10 years. I talk about democracy in India. We have a certain privilege, and this narrative and this discourse, we can afford it. But if you look at 70 years of our countries, the poorest of poor has never had democracy, going for them.
Yeah.
They perhaps would, it didn't matter, it doesn't matter to them at all if it was British or now these guys. Okay.
That wasn't democracy. British was not democracy, but anyway.
And coming to the dictators, for example, General Pervez Musharraf is one of my personal favorite, by the way. I'll tell you when.
Personally, he's a very nice guy.
Yeah, personally, personally.
But he took Pakistan backwards rather than forward.
Well, see, the thing is, the main problem with our countries, our societies, is that we think that somebody will come and take us forward, or somebody came and put us a few years behind.
But when it's a dictator, they do.
Even Democrats are doing that.
They do that, yes.
The problem is within our society, we have to understand and we have to realize and accept that our societies basically have, it's like, I was talking in the session in the morning, this Me Too session, when we say that we have laws against sexual discrimination, sexual assault, and molestations and everything, and we have laws against child marriage, we have laws against caste discrimination, but simply by making laws, these things cannot be eradicated.
No.
There has to be a conversation happening every day, everywhere, within the classrooms, within our homes, within our societies. Every single day there has to be a conversation, only then the laws will make sense. Similarly, democracy doesn't make any sense simply by saying that every 5 years we are having elections. Because in a sense, Indians and Pakistanis, basically I consider them in the same society, in a sense, we are not democratic. Within our families, for example, if there is a family and there is a father, the father is the greatest dictator on the planet. You cannot go against your father. That's exactly what I'm saying. As long as we are going to say what's wrong with that, I respect my father, which means that the respect has been inherited. Sorry, I understand. You stop, Mrs. Pajan. I'm a satirist, so I understand.
There you go.
No, the thing is, look at how many times our own families have killed their daughters because they chose to marry a man of their choice.
Yeah.
Now, if we have such a society, the democracy in political form, in political parties form, is a farce.
So I will just say to that one thing. I agree with all of these points, but that's the other side of the picture. The side that I'm looking at is the fact that when the daughters were listening to their families and doing what the families wanted them to do, they weren't getting killed. So when you do what you're told to do, then you don't go against the system that exists. So that brings me to my other point about democracy, and you're absolutely right. It's not, you just say it's a democracy and you have votes and then you can just, that's not it. That's what I'm saying, it's a process, and there's an ecosystem around it, which, as you said, comes with the conversations and the talking about those things. Now, I think there's something, and Natasha has, I think, left right now because she had to go back there, but we were talking about this yesterday, and this is something that I'm working on right now, is that there's something that I would call democratic aspirations. Aspirations of people for the basic rights, okay? Basic rights the basic human needs for survival, which is food, shelter, clothing, and then you have education, health, clean water, maternal mortality, to bring that down, child, and all that, right? And then beyond that, you have other rights that I think actually only you get in a democracy and you cannot in a dictatorship, which is freedom of expression, the right to marry who you choose, the basic other rights, which are people's democratic aspirations, right?
Well, as if we take the present world as an example, I don't think that's happening in any democracy around the world.
No.
Secondly, my point is in our countries, see, we live in a hierarchy. In a society, we live in a hierarchy. All of us lie somewhere within the limits. We are such haramis that wherever we lie within the hierarchy, we want democracy above us. And below us, we don't want to give democracy. So that is the logical fallacy.
But that's a huge generalization, right?
But that's true in our societies. That's what
It's true generally,
Like-
but, sorry if I can just interrupt.
Sure.
It's true generally, but where is the violence and the pushback coming from? It's coming because the people who are below whichever hierarchy, they are fighting for those democratic aspirations.
Yeah.
And when they push back, whether it's the Dalits in India or the low, and I don't think it's a religious thing, I think it's a class thing. When someone like Asia Bibi stands up and tells the women who say you are polluting the water from our well because you drank from it, in this day and age, now people stand up and she can say, my Jesus is as good as your prophet and you cannot tell me this. 10-15 years ago, somebody like Asia Bibi from that class would have said, oh, I'm very sorry and please forgive me, and walked off. So now people are standing up, and so that is what I'm talking about, democratic
Asia
aspirations.
Bibi's case is actually a very curious one. Right? Like she was awarded the death penalty, and then just now Supreme Court of Pakistan has
Acquitted
her.
Yeah.
And the mullahs are out there to get her.
So the reason for that is because, okay, so this brings that blasphemy issue in Pakistan, by the way, is exactly like what's happening, how the right wing in India is using the beef ban.
Yeah.
The blasphemy issue in Pakistan started, it was brought in by Zia, by General Zia, the military dictator then, but what he expanded the existing so-called blasphemy law, and I'm saying so-called because it's not exactly blasphemy, technically it's different, but he added clauses to the existing laws imposed by the British, which were about injuring religious sentiment, right? So Zia added that and made them more specific and added punishments like death for some parts of it. Now, as those laws started coming into effect and the right wing started to realize that they could use it to get people emotional and to latch up with them, that is the time that Pakistan started transitioning into democracy, so-called, right? Because it's not, but the transitioning began to happen. And these guys realized that now their political relevance is completely eroding, so this is a good issue to grab onto and use for political purposes. Like religion is being used very, very calculatedly for political purposes, and the blasphemy law is being used for that purpose. And that's what's happening in India as well.
Zia actually is not a good example because that guy was unique. I mean, there is no parallel. Even among dictators, Zia was something else. But what about Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who started the persecution of Ahmadis and brought about a constitution amendment?
Yeah.
And Zulfikar Ali Bhutto totally dismissed the verdict of 1971 elections about Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And he actually, Mujibur Rahman was imprisoned and given death penalty. And I'm sure we all know that the cell in which Mujibur Rahman was put in Pakistan, there was a grave dug next to where he was in the cell to remind him that you're going to go down here.
Right.
So I'm just saying that democracy cannot coexist with a feudal mentality.
You are absolutely
and we have
I
not
think
been
it
able
can't
to
exist with capitalism, if I may say.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
That's an
all
oxymoron.
these things are so intertwined. You know,
Yeah.
it works in the favor of capitalism that we have such societies, and that's why capitalism pushes for, like what America does, that we are going to bring democracy to a certain country, and they walk into that country and that totally destroy them, whether it's Iraq or whether it's, now they're trying to do it in Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have to understand democracy truly means that, you know, everybody should get equal share of the resources,
Yes.
but that actually is the idea of communism.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll tell you something my father used to always say. When people said that, oh, after the USSR, collapse of USSR, people were like, oh, socialism is dead. And my father said, no, socialism is not, because those ideals are now those are held up now as the basic rights that countries are aspiring towards, or people are aspiring towards: healthcare, education, resources for all. And that's what the rhetoric is in all the democracies. So you're right.
Again, I want to emphasize one thing again. You know, every leader in every country promises to bring development, more development, and people buy that and vote that person in the hope that there will be more development. But the thing is, you cannot get infinite development from finite resources. Resources are finite, and when human beings are procreating and increasing their population, there is only this much that they can get out of the resource back.
Right.
So if anybody promises you a development, is basically fooling you. And the basic idea of democracy nowadays, every leader, whether it's, even in Brazil, this guy, I'm forgetting his name, who won his election on WhatsApp. Yeah, he also promised the same thing. But along with the idea of development, he also started rhetoric against homosexuals and indigenous people, and clearly said, I'll destroy Amazon and give it to the corporate houses. Same thing with Narendra Modi, he promised development. And around the development, the beef ban and the mandirs
So
and this and
we
that.
say development in quotes because that's not real development, because it's a sham for the people.
If people get developed, then these buggers will
According to the actual way that
be.
development.
Why are you getting so serious and
Yeah,
political?
no, because it's a discussion, because the world is like that.
Yeah, everybody's
now.
turned. Everybody's turned that they thought that it was going to be a funny thing.
No, I think it's not a performance, it's just a discussion. So, but you know, we're totally open to other people jumping in and saying, coming in with any comments or questions, suggestions. So if anybody does, please just indicate and start. Go on. And if nobody does, we can carry on. Unless we've silenced everybody with our heavy.
Wow.
So So my daughter says to me, you don't know how to have a light conversation. So Sanjay, तुम्हारे बारे में तो ये नहीं कहा जा सकता ना.
Well, unless I get paid, I'm not funny.
Unfortunately, I mean, you don't even have a cup of tea. Well, you got plenty of coffee. You got some coffee.
So that's what the leaders promise when they promise democracy. Yeah. You already, I've given you had 2 coffees, I'll give you 1 more. Vote for me.
Yeah.
No, the thing is, coming back to the whole, the idea of stand-up comedy in India, for example, last night, what prompted me to say yes to perform for 5-10 minutes, whatever I did.
That was really good.
Was that the young boy from Pakistan
Oh yeah,
who was talking about chai tea.
Yeah.
Shuja, yeah. And I thought that's a very smart, interesting observation. And it was funny too. But what I would prefer, if given a chance, I would not go and watch that. That's not because he's not good, but because I am only attracted to comics who are in the league of George Carlin. Okay, or people who find politics, because politics is everything. If you don't choose your politics, the politics will choose you.
Yeah.
So I only am interested in humor which is deeply political, it hurts. It stuns you and then it leaves you hollow.
And makes you think.
Makes you think, and 3 days after you've heard that, you are still thinking about it. Because I'm not going to think about chai tea once I'm out of that room. That doesn't mean that guy is not talented. He definitely has a potential, but I always think that the problem with a lot of these comics these days is that they don't read. Everybody, each one of us has at least 2 jokes in our life. I mean, come on, we are all grown-ups now. We have had colorful life in different countries. We all have 2 jokes in our life that we can tell and easily pass 5 to 7 years with those 2 jokes, because
Which are yours?
Sorry?
Which are your 2?
My first joke was my corporate job. That was my biggest joke. But what do you do after you have exhausted those 2 jokes in 20 countries? You can only get new jokes or new power of understanding if you read. If you read about stuff, if you read what is happening around you, if you really understand. Like a lot of these people who are out on the streets of Delhi right now, we should punish Pakistan right now. They don't even understand the conflict. They will only understand it if they read it, if they read about it.
And most of them can't even read.
Yeah. And this is a WhatsApp generation, and you show them, like this film recently came, Uri. This was a propaganda film that came in India about a surgical strike. Recently in February I was in Pakistan, and I was at dinner at Hadia's place, Karachi, and she had invited Hadia's father was in the army, and Hadia's brother was Colonel ISI, and General Moin was there, retired General Moin was there, and jokingly they were all addressing me, or by surgical strike. So, it is very important to be educated, and education doesn't mean degree. I mean, to really read and understand that when you have read so much, then it is very difficult for anybody to fool you. Then you know the true story. Why would you believe all the nonsense that is going around you? And that's the problem with comics. Like in India, there used to be a group called AIB. Young boys, very intelligent, very smart boys, but urban elites. No exposure to the real India. No exposure to the caste fault lines. Caste is the biggest issue in India. And they used to make jokes about Mayawati, for example. That how ugly she is. And for me, it's not funny.
No.
People found it funny. All the urban crowd was, and that's why Acidity Democracy was born.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
So Varun Grover, my partner in Acidity Democracy, is a national award-winning writer and lyricist. He wrote songs for Gangs of Wasseypur. He wrote the film Masal, which is being screened in the Dalit Film Festival in New York right now. And so he has recently written The Sacred Games on Netflix. So, and he's also a stand-up comic. And he's a good friend of mine. And I told him that and Varun also comes from a small town in UP like me. very down to earth, very soft spoken, very proficient in Hindi. So we both decided that if we do not do something right now, this is in 2012 I'm talking about, if we do not do something right now, this comedy space that is recently, being created in India will be taken over by the elites the way they have taken over literature. Like, why is Chetan Bhagat the bestseller? Because nobody came and filled that vacuum of easy writing. I'm a firm believer that language should be a tool to make communication easier between people.
Yeah.
But the problem with a lot of these academics who go to Oxford or Cambridge, and when they come back to India, for example, they talk in a language that nobody else understands. Only they can talk to each other, and they form an elite company. It's like a Brahmin speaking in Sanskrit, so that no Dalit understands. So everybody else,
Exclusionary.
yeah, everybody else feels excluded, and so there was a vacuum of somebody speaking and writing a simple English language, and it doesn't matter to me how good is your vocabulary, how good is your English. I don't understand you. As simple as that. And that's why, because these liberal elites, it's a failure of liberals. Liberal elites had this arrogance for so many years. Now the one excluded is taking revenge.
Yeah.
Now that's why liberal word is a gali, is an abuse. That's why intellectual is an abuse.
Yeah.
For these people like Modi and his chamchas.
Yeah. There is this anti-intellectualism.
And that's why Chetan Bhagat is the bestseller. So I told Varun, if we don't do something right now, the same thing will happen here. And it took us 3 years because he was busy in his own work, I was busy in my own work. It took us 3 years to come together and bring Rahul in for music. And we did a show. We thought that we'll do just one show and just we'll get done with it. Fine. And it so happened that it coincided with Modi taking oath. So when Modi took oath, the next weekend we had a show called Aise Taise Democracy. And everybody in the BJP assumed that we created the group for that.
Well, they not think that important.
At that time they didn't know. Now it has become a cult thing, so everybody is after us. So now after 50, 55, 60 shows right now, our main aim is to keep asking questions from the government, from the people keep on coming and asking, why don't you talk about Rahul Gandhi? Why should I talk about Rahul Gandhi is not in power? When he comes into power, I talk to him. I'll ask questions.
And in fact, you were telling me, that you were saying that they were wanting you to come and do stuff for them.
Yeah.
And you said no.
Because, like, Congress, for example, is after us to, push their agenda, write songs for them. They're also paying good amount of money, and we said no, we can't do that because tomorrow.
Your independence.
Yeah, because also we are non-partisan, and we will lose our credibility. Then we will be Brahminas Congress. Already we are 3 people. Our name are Rahul, Varun, and Sanjay. So already we get told for that.
Yeah.
So we said no, we can't do it because tomorrow when you are going to come into power, we're going to be tough on you. So far so good. We have been doing well in the sense that there's a cult following, which gives me a little bit of hope that I'm not looking at a big gain out of this. I'm just looking for a small satisfaction in my heart when I see in the May elections Narendra Modi is driven to dust. But with this Pakistani mischief, I think.
Well, it's very convenient, this thing that's happened, and it's a tragic loss of lives. And you were saying, we were talking about this also 3 years ago in, what was the name of the place where how many people were killed in that?
Dantewada.
Dantewada. And
76 personnel died.
76 security personnel died. And why was there not this kind of outrage and noise and thing then, 3 years ago?
See, the thing is, outrage because it happened then also. But at that time, it was pointed towards JNU.
How was that? Why?
Because JNU is considered to be a left bastion, and JNUites are supposed to be intellectuals, and the system is anti-intellectual, anti-left. So, and Naxalites are supposed to be, JNU is supposed to be sympathetic to Naxalites. And So the entire I was directed towards JNU. People like Kanhaiya Kumar or Khalid Anirban, they were all charged under sedition laws, and the charge sheet has been filed now after 3 years.
That's again very convenient.
Yeah, just before the elections.
And so this charge that you're saying that they are charged with being sympathetic to Naxalites, do you think it's a true charge?
I'm sympathetic to Naxalites.
Explain.
Well, who do you call a Naxalite, right? For when you have, see, it's like this American guy who went to Andaman to teach Christianity to these tribals. Okay, and the tribals killed him. Right? I was just wondering, like, who is this guy? When sitting in his home, he's looking at the globe, which is the place which is not been fucked by religion. And then he points this finger at Andaman, where tribals are happily living for centuries without any religion. And then he goes there to teach them Christianity.
And he has been told when he goes there, he knows that he can't.
But he said, Jesus will save me.
Well,
At that time, probably Jesus was busy gambling or drinking, he didn't pay any attention, so the tribals killed him.
Jesus doesn't.
All gods drink, Why do you think they created us? How? They were drunk. Yeah, it's like I eat rice with my hands, for example. Some Chinese dude comes to me and gives me chopsticks. Eat with this. I don't need it. I'm happy with my hands. So those tribals, if you take the jungles, if you take the resources, if you give it all to the industrialists, and tribals live, they don't need any supermarket, they don't need a shopping mall, they don't need big cars, they don't need corporate offices, they are self-sufficient in their jungles. But if the jungles are taken away from them, their women are raped, their children are killed, and if they, ask a simple question, why are you doing this to us? And they are branded as Naxalites. I'm on this side.
I mean, that sounds like basic rights, actually.
You cannot. Like, there are many urban dwellers who would say, what's wrong with these tribals here? We are giving them shopping malls. It's again the same thing. I don't need those.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm sympathetic to Naxalites, and even I'm branded as urban Naxal. There's a new term that has come up in India. I've been branded as an urban Naxal, and there's an entire book that has been written. It's called Urban Naxal by this idiot called Vivek Agnihotri. He's a film director.
Yeah.
In fact, Tanushri, who was here, she was harassed by him also.
Oh.
So Dana Patekar and him, both of them. So Urban Naxal has come up because, see, this is a disconnect, and that's why I keep on insisting that people should read. But what people choose to read, Urban Naxal, the book.
So then that's a bit of a dilemma. If you say people should read, what do you think they should read?
Read everything, no? And
make up your own mind.
Make up your own mind. And
So you think they're not reading the other side, they're only reading one side?
they are reading things, again I'm saying, they are reading things which are easy to read. If I write a book which is so complex that dialectical materialism is such a, I make it such a monster, nobody would want to come and read it. If I write a book like a Half Girlfriend, everybody's going to buy it and read it. So the language has been complicated so much by these liberals that I have a problem with it. Like I remember I went to government school, I went to English medium school, my English is not very good, and I was a kid, and I was playing in the neighborhood with other neighborhood kids, and they used to go to fancy English medium schools, and they used to talk to each other in English. And I was standing there, I couldn't communicate, I couldn't even understand. One day I tried to speak English, and I said, does she goes there? And they made fun of me. Doesn't goes. And I was scarred for life. I can never use doesn't goes together again. That's what has happened to majority of the people in this country, in our countries.
Yeah. Because we are
Same here
complex.
also. Same here also. Why do you think an idiot like Donald Trump is the president of this country? In fact, the other day, this guy was okay. This is a story from some other guy. This is a very funny story.
Why not for us?
No, this guy at the immigration, the same guy was what business we have in Pakistan. So there were 15 people sitting in the room, and suddenly started.
Because he's got a lot of Pakistan visas on his passport.
And suddenly he starts speaking loudly. So why were you arrested in 2006? embarrass me in front of all this. This is the first
That's the idea.
reaction that you, as an Indian or a Pakistani, will very बेइज्जती हुई है सबके. So, and there's a photograph of Donald Trump behind him. So, and I was tired and I didn't want that hassle, but I was irritated. I asked him, I told him, you were trying to embarrass me. I thought, let me embarrass him. Who's that guy behind you? In the red tie? So that's our president. And now we're here.
Nice one.
And that's what happens with a lot of the security. You've had your brushes with security, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I was
But it's
picked up by
very-
ISI.
Yeah.
You know, I was picked up by them and they came to T2F.
So ISI is Pakistani intelligence, and
Yeah.
he was in Pakistan, so they came and took him out. So
And they told Sabine that we need to talk to him for a couple of hours, and they locked me in a room in T2F, and everybody was Mohsin and Sabine, they were all waiting outside. And for 3 hours, these two guys kept on playing games with me. Oh, you are an artist. We love artists. We want peace. Yeah, I know that. I'm also called Brad Pitt at home. And then he says, no, we are misunderstood. I'm saying this in English so that Ken also gets it, because otherwise they were speaking to me in Urdu. And eventually, after talking non-stop for a couple of hours, then he says, I need to stay here longer. I said, gladly. But I don't have a visa. Don't worry about the visa, give us your passport. We'll take care of it. Yeah, right. I should give my passport to you. I thought I was the comic in this room. What do? They present you with these situations. So I said, you know what, I don't have it right now. Okay, we'll collect it from you in the evening. So they left. I came out and Mohsin and Sabine brought him. I told them they will ask for my passport. Mohsin says, right now, leave for the airport right now. And my flight was at 11 o'clock in the morning. I reached the airport at 4 o'clock.
he actually sent you off.
Yeah, at 4 o'clock I reached the airport, and the security personnel at the airport didn't let me in. Your flight is at 11, why are you coming at 4? Please, once I got inside, and Mohsin, after the flight had left, Mohsin tweeted, has Sanjay boarded the flight? And Sabah, what's her name? No, Sabah. She was from India, she also came. She was also on the same flight.
Sabah Haji.
Sabah
Haji.
Haji.
Haji Baji.
Yeah.
She tweeted, no, he's not on the flight. And all hell broke loose. Where is Sanjay? He's untraceable. So
She did that on purpose, or she was just having...
No, she didn't know I was
She
there.
didn't know. Oh.
She didn't know I was on the
I
flight.
thought she was being mischievous.
So I'm just saying that there are many mistakes that liberals have made in the last, post World War II, liberal democracies had plenty of time to take care of business. But what they actually did was, they have widened the gap even further. 1% of people on the earth, they have 99% of the wealth. And this is all product of liberal democracies post World War II. Now what do the 99% do? They hate people who read, who go to good colleges, who can speak good language. They hate people who are of different color. They hate people who are who have different food habits. They hate them because they feel cheated. And now it's revenge time. And liberals have, and people like me, I never went to good schools. I never had a good education. I never spoke that fancy language. I used does and goes. And now even I am classified as liberal.
So how do you get around that?
I make fun of it, I do comedy, there's no other way. So for me, the only escape is to create some humor out of that. And in fact, we don't need to create humor in our country, it's right there. We just need to see. Like Narendra Modi, for example, went to Canada and said that India and Canada are like 2AB in the formula of A plus B whole square. And everybody was saying, what? Then, and he goes and talks nonsense. So, Navjot Singh Sidhu, he just said it. He went to Bareilly, Narendra Modi went to Bareilly and said, भाइयों बहनों, बरेली से मेरा पुराना नाता है क्योंकि झुमका ही नहीं गिरा था. So
Untranslated.
This cannot be translated. And then he said, जापान से, he went to Japan and said, जापान से मेरा पुराना नाता है. जब मैं छोटा था चाय पीता था, मेरा पापा मेरे को बोलता, मेरा बाप मेरे को बोलता, बालनरेंद्र जा पान लेके आ.
Every serious place. असम से मेरा नाता है. मैं चाय बेचता था, तुम चाय उगाते हो, मैं चाय बनाता हूँ और बेचता हूँ. He actually said some of this.
He's such an idiot. He's, you know, between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi is more dangerous.
So, but I'm gonna say, Sanjay, can I just say that actually I have some actual news about Narendra Modi and Donald Trump. So did you know that actually they are long lost twin brothers who were separated at birth? I have this certificate, the birth certificate.
And there is a
birth certificate.
And Donald Trump has a daughter in Pakistan.
And this is not fake news. This is not fake news, right?
She's not being allowed to meet her father.
Yeah. No, this guy is such an. Why I say Narendra Modi is more dangerous than Donald Trump? Donald Trump is simply an idiot. He's a character who is an idiot, but Narendra Modi is ideological. He has an ideology, which is the RSS ideology. That's why he's more dangerous, he's more vicious. But look at the lies that he sells. So petroleum during the previous government was 70 rupees a litre. And in his government, it's 80 rupees a litre. While he had promised I will bring it out to 50. Again, the promise of development. So when it became 80, everybody started shouting, oh, you promised that it would be lesser than 70. So they came up with a graph where in the UPA government, the petrol was 70. In NDA government, petrol was 80. See, there is an improvement. I mean, me and you, if we want to lie, we either lie in Hindi, Urdu or English. This guy is lying in mathematics. Where do you find such characters? And still, I mean, people blindly follow such morons, such narcissistic characters because they are taking a revenge. There is no other logic. And this bigotry is a disease. Bigotry is actually a disease and it's a mental condition. There are people who had, there are people like this song, Mere Samne Wali Sadat we wrote, and there is one page, some guy, Rehan Allah.
Yeah.
So he put up the song on his page or somewhere, and look at the abuse some of these Muslims are writing against Hindus. And some of the things that we write, or some of the Muslims that write in India, the kind of abuse they get just because Hindu and Muslim. And many of these characters have never met a Muslim in their life or interacted with them. No Muslim has ever harmed them. And none of the characters who are abusing us have met a Hindu in their life. So where is this hatred coming from? It's a disease. It's like I'm bipolar. Where is this coming from? It's a disease.
No, it's not just a disease.
It's not a disease. It's what they've been told all their
calculated
lives, right?
Absolutely.
narrative that has been built up. There's a lot of research on it, and it's very dangerous, very
Absolutely.
organized.
I'm just saying that after a point when you find such unreasonable hate, how do you reconcile with it? Everybody's not a
You
psychiatrist.
can't reconcile. You shouldn't. I've met people in my life, people I'm related to in blood, who said that the Gujarat carnage was a good idea. They
Yeah.
need to be taught a lesson.
Yeah.
They need to be shown their place.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? My God, I don't want to
At
live
some
with
point
that.
of time, you just say, you're sick, man.
Yeah.
So that's by disease I mean that at some point of time, logic and rationality are the tools that you can use with someone who understands logic and rationality. Somebody who doesn't understand your language, after a point would say, you're sick, you need help.
So they need help. This is true. They do need help. And Preeti, what you were saying, that this is in studies, this is not random, this is all very calculated. And I think that's the same thing that goes for the way that they're using it in Pakistan, right? Because this is one way that they stay in the political realm, in the stay politically relevant.
Also, a lot of it comes from, the tragedy of partition has not been resolved. The violence of partition, it somehow it has become genetically coded in generations. It has been passed on and on and on.
But I find, it has in a way, but what I find really hopeful, and I know that it seems like we're kind of like talking on the opposite side, but I keep finding hope in so many things. And one of the things that I find hopeful is that despite the conditioning, despite the, all the way that people, the wrong things that people read and all of that, despite all of that, I come across so many, especially young people, who are not following that thought, and they are countering it in their own ways.
Yeah, but
So-
that's, I mean, yeah, there are always people who read and who are rational and who think. But the fact remains, I am not a product of a partition family. When I first came to Pakistan, I had nobody there, I didn't know anyone. My fascination with Pakistan was because I read a lot about Pakistan. And my fascination was that this is a shared history and I don't know about it because I've never
But I
visited.
come across this from a lot of young people who have no connection with Pakistan or India, and they are still. So when you're saying that it's a sort of a unresolved thing of partition, that is absolutely true, and there's a hunger for that. And now you are seeing things like the Partition Museum at Amritsar.
Yeah.
You are seeing initiatives like people trying to, the Oral Histories Project. There's so many different kinds of initiatives that are taking place that are countering this whole overall narrative. And I find that a sign of hope. But
Yeah, of course there is hope. I mean, there is hope that one day we'll colonize Mars also. But my thing is that resolution of conflicts is not something that we have excelled in. And there have been many conflicts in our part of the world, but we have not excelled in resolving those conflicts. Like somebody's grandmother in her last days says, "I want to die in Lahore," for example. Third generation has nothing to do with Lahore, but has heard those stories throughout the grandmother's life about hatred and violence and this and that. And psychologists say that violence ultimately psychologically gets decoded in your system and you can pass it on. And that can only be countered by conflict resolution, conflict management.
and people-to-people contact.
Yeah.
Because when people actually meet, they realize that okay, we are actually not so we are actually quite similar.
Even if that happens, like there was one guy who came to the social media Mela, Venkat Anand.
I remember.
Okay. And I always doubted that guy. And I think he's a right winger in closet. So he made people to people contact. There are people like Narendra Modi made contact with Nawaz Sharif.
So I think Bilawal Bhutto made a really good point in that interview that he gave at Davos last year, where he said, yes, he came and that is a personal contact, but Narendra Modi is not a personal, he's not there as an individual, he's the Prime Minister of a country. So unless that translates into state policies and discussion at the state level, those personal contacts between the leaders won't do anything. But
Yeah.
the people need to also meet, but unless we get visas, we can't meet. So
Yeah, but
you
also,
you get the Pakistan but for us to get visas to India is almost impossible. It's like next to impossible.
But that's what I always say, na, Pakistanis don't need visa to come to India.
But that's the wrong kind of Pakistanis. Those are the kind of Pakistanis that are killing Pakistanis as well.
Yeah, that was a joke.
Sorry, I thought it was serious, but that's what's causing a lot of violence.
No, but the thing is, I've seen universities and, I've talked to a lot of psychiatrists who say that conflict resolution is a very important, whether it's within family, if there is a historical event that has happened in a family, it passes, and if it is not resolved, then it leaves a scar and you pass it on.
I think even if in normal, day-to-day life, but would anybody else like to?
Wow, this has become so intense.
I was in India in December, and a friend of mine works in a company, and so the taxi driver took me there, and we were waiting outside. So I only know very little Hindi, and he spoke Hindi. So I started speaking to him in my short Hindi versions. And he said, so he described this space to me. He said, can you see these people? They were walking, around in this company. And all of them were dressed as you would be in Europe, right? So here is, and he said to me, I work for this not this company, but a taxi driver. He said, these guys only have to go out for 2 years into Europe or America. When they come back, they don't know Hindi anymore.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
what is, and his whole description it's a psychological condition. So he's now a little man,
Mhm.
and these young people, they weren't very old,
Yeah.
but they are now elites of a very different
Well, that-
type, you know.
You're absolutely right. Like this again is Indians they are very feudal. Okay, and everybody wants to be the lord. And when you have been outside India, in Europe or America or wherever, and you come back, you automatically elevate your status in your own head. That now
I'm somebody else.
I'm somebody else. You
Yeah.
start speaking fake accents. I lived for
Yes,
9 years
yes,
here.
yeah.
I still don't have an accent. And my brother, my younger brother, has been living here for 21 years. In 6 months, he got an accent.
But that has to do, I think, with the colonization, the
Exactly,
mentality, and I think
exactly.
it has to do with the power of language, and because the language of power in our country is because of the colonized history, the language of power is English, and which is why people say to us, "Oh, you speak such good English." Well, we were sent to good schools because my parents were able to send me to
That's
good
why I
schools.
make
So
it. That's
yeah.
why I make it a point to speak in Hindi.
So, अच्छा है, yeah.
Whenever I do my
So we're going to
stand-ups.
speak in English.
But that's it's a large differentiation. I mean, this is a small elite who speak very
Yeah.
well. And it's not the
In fact-
it's not the speaking, it's the, I think, when you said there's a sick mind,
Yeah.
is that when you become somebody, want to become someone else,
Yeah.
now you want to be European or anything else,
And they
but
don't.
you don't want to be what your people
But so,
are.
this,
And they don't even speak good English.
So that this is,
One
this
of the
is
guys was saying the Britishers are like this. Man, there is no word like Britishers.
But this
But
is
it
a
doesn't matter.
this
Because
is a
what
mind,
communication, like you said, right? And I
mind
think,
effect.
so I think one of the media in a way has been really bad for our countries in some ways, but one of the things that's happened with like the start of the channels in Pakistan, for example, is that that old thing about like good Urdu or good English, that has been broken. So now, actually, when people speak English, even if it's not good, if somebody makes fun of them, there's always someone who says, you don't have to make fun of that because it's not that person's language. Or it doesn't matter if that person's not speaking Urdu or great Urdu or great Hindi because they're communicating what they want. So there's a pushback, I think, against that. I always stand. Like, there were people who were making fun of this actress Meera because her English is not so good. But she's gorgeous and she's was making trying to communicate. And people who are making fun of that, I find them pathetic. To be
Yeah,
honest,
yeah.
I do. I think it's pathetic to make fun of.
But that desire, you see that desire is
Sahib banna sahib.
that desire is
And Ken is totally.
has an impact.
Ken is fascinated by his insight into India, Pakistan politics and how you can't actually tell who's Indian and who's Pakistani.
Yeah, but what you're talking about actually points towards intolerance, right? So if somebody can't speak polished English or whatever language it is, they are pointed out that, you're not one of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, but then
So that's
like,
exclusionary, that's
Yeah.
intolerant.
so
And
I
that's
think
what Sanjay has been talking about, is this liberal elitism.
Unless you have $1 billion, then it doesn't matter.
Then it doesn't
Like-
matter, of
doesn't
course.
matter.
Like
But I think partly what we're
Then
talking
you don't
about,
even need to talk.
True.
but I think what we were talking about earlier about democracy and democratic aspirations and all, I think for me, part of that is inclusion. Democratic aspirations is about inclusion and about pluralism and about non-exclusivity as far as you can, and that's what brings us closer.
Well, I
despite whatever.
see. We all have our separate fields of work. You're a journalist. Ken is a journalist. Omar is a digital marketing champion.
Looking for a job, everybody. Amar, looking for a job in Boston.
Thank you. And our friend's hand is healed, so she job well.
Single-handedly
Self-healer.
So the thing is, we all
Also as an artist.
Yeah, just see market. So all of us, I guess this is preaching to the choir happening in this room. Because
Right,
all of us, in our own ways, we are trying, we are probably facing the same issue in various degrees, right? We are all trying to navigate and find our ways, and sometimes we engage with these people, sometimes we ridicule these people, sometimes we don't want to engage with these people.
What do you mean by these people?
People that I call that you are sick needle, for example. People like Sal mentioned that he doesn't speak, this guy doesn't speak with English, he's not one of us. people like man was saying that the cabbie was telling about. We have people like them in our families, but my thing is that for me the best way to deal with all this is humor. Just to
But so Sanjay, that's a kind of a, so you said something, it's a bit contradictory for me, because you said something about, that you're making fun, it's humor and all of that, right? And then you were talking about the importance of reconciliation in a way, right? So maybe I don't think that you can have reconciliation if you label people.
see, when I say reconciliation, I meant that after a point, I give up in the sense that now, from now onwards, I'm not trying to change you, I'm just going to make fun of you.
Right, but in a way, isn't that kind of and so it's thought-provoking, it's funny, it gets whatever, but again, then you're preaching to the converted, because people who only will agree with your politics, they're the only ones who will watch you.
No, when I started, there were 5 people who came to my shows. Then it became 15, then it became 500, then it became 5,000. Now we have like more than 200,000 followers on Twitter.
Right, but they're all people who agree with your politics. Mostly,
So
right?
finally, starting from 5, I have now 200,000 people who agree with my politics.
Right.
And those 200,000 people may be talking to, like here, I never thought, like even last night, there were like 5 guys who came up to me, we like your work, for example. And I didn't know that even here people see, people, even in this conference, there were many, like this guy Sumit who gave me the charger. So people do watch, and in their own way, they make sense of it and pass it on to other people. For me, reconciliation is that I'm not a funny man, frankly speaking. I don't think I'm funny. I'm a very angry person, and I'm really angry with the world. And if given a chance, I would become a comet and just smash on this planet. Seriously, that's how angry I am. But I'm alive and I have to live. So what better way than to?
But then that's another contradiction. You want to smash the world, but then you have a lot of empathy with part of the world as well. You also want to.
No, I'm an empathetic person. That is true. But I also have empathy towards all those species who own the planet with us. It is their home too. And when I see human beings destroying the place,
It makes you angry.
it makes me angry. And anger and empathy can coexist.
Yes.
You can have these emotions at the same time. And anger, because this is ridiculous, the way we are polluting our rivers, the way we are throwing garbage in the mountains and cutting jungles and taking resources from the animals and grabbing all of it for ourselves. This makes me angry. Empathetic, because when I see that which is the percentage that is doing it. When you see a poor man picking up rice from a drain, I can't be angry at that poor guy. So they can coexist. I mean, and I never claim that I have all the clarity in my life. I'm also finding my way through these maze. Sometimes I'm very confused. Sometimes the only thing that I'm not confused about, I never had any doubt about, is science. I'm a man of science, man of physics and mathematics. I was always an atheist because very early in my life I discovered physics and mathematics and I fell in love with them. And till date, I have no confusion about Newton's laws of motion or quantum mechanics or Heisenberg's uncertainty principle or trigonometry. No doubt whatsoever. But everything else about them, like poetry for example, poetry confuses me. Because poetry can be empathetic and angry at the same time. Like Sahib Udyanvi's song after India's independence, Jine Naaz Hai Hind Par Wo Kahan Hai. That song is empathetic and angry at the same time. Because the poet wants something good for the country and something else is happening. So, we all have this conflicting emotion, that's why we have art. Unfortunately, I'm not an artist in that sense.
But I think what you're talking about has to do with that the world is not black and white, that there is complexity and there is nuance, and that is something.
Only if you're interested in the world of human beings. In the world of animals, it's clearly black and white. You are hungry, you will kill. Otherwise, you won't bother the environment at all. In human beings, we think we are the center of the universe, but we are not. Tomorrow, in the entire context of the universe, a meteorite hits the planet and the planet is destroyed, nobody in the context of the universe is going to bat an eyelid. This cosmos is just a grain of sand in the entire desert of Sahara. How does it matter to the entire universe? 18 billion light years is the length of the universe. And we are just one galaxy, one solar system, one planet, one country.
The apartment,
औकात में रहो। No?
that means stability.
And the idea of God is also that God created, idea of God is that there is somebody who's taking care of the human beings as if they are the center of the universe. They are not. We want to be the center of the universe, that's why we created God. And that's what Stephen Hawking says in his last book, before he died. There is no God, and that guy from Andaman, if he comes back alive, he would testify. Jesus did not come rescue him.
He's united with Jesus now, whatever Jesus says.
No, he'll be very surprised Jesus is not there. He must be going around looking for him, but Jesus is not there. So, and same like this guy, this Jesh bomber, he posted a video, it's Vidayin video, and he says, मैं जन्नत में मजे लूट रहा हूँगा तो क्या? I mean, you don't have to blast yourself to have a good time. Go to Las Vegas. You'll have a good time. No, you don't need
It
money.
was easier for him to get into Kashmir than getting the visa.
He was in Kashmir.
No, he was actually.
Yeah, easier there. No visa.
No, what I'm saying is that if you want to have fun, there are plenty of ways to have fun here. Because you want 72 women somewhere in Jannat, which you have not seen, you have been told, and you know.
No, I think just want to add on here what you were saying earlier, that what happened is that whoever, like our forefather, ancestors, and people around us, they tell us that you're blaming that this person is a problem. I mean, he's the one, you are in the problem. If you're poor, he's the one. If you have you have some issues with your family, with relationships now, he's the person. You're not eating properly, he's the person. So you build up that narrative that this person is to blame for everything going on around me. So if you cannot fix that, you pass it on to your children that I cannot provide for you because of this person. So that person, that children become that hater kind of thing. So I think that's what's happening as well, that we blame people around us. Like in Pakistan, I mean, for everything we blame everything, that this is Western conspiracy or Indian people or Jews are, they're doing for us Pakistan because they don't want us to prosper, right? We don't look for solution ourselves, we like to blame. We need someone to blame on. So similarly with the God as well, we like to, I mean, I'm a religious person now, but we need someone to, put a blame,
the cycle. We don't
to
need
put a blame on something, even for happiness or for anything, because of that person. So we need someone around us.
Also, you start reversing it. Whenever you're unhappy, start blaming your father. Whenever you're unhappy, I'm unhappy because
I used to do that, but now I'm going to be father, so I don't know how I can do that.
But there's a Peanuts, Charlie Brown, the Peanuts. I remember a cartoon from that where Linus is telling Lucy that the world is in a bad shape and blah blah, and the environment, and she's like, whose fault is that? He says, it's nobody's fault. And she's like, what do you mean nobody's fault? And then big stuff, find a scapegoat. So we have to find a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Well, the fault normally lies with us, which is what we don't want to.
yeah.
That's why we find other people to blame or other
Exactly.
things to blame. The other point, about this, where this bomber chap was, it's very easy to fall under the spell of, this 72, whatever it is, in heaven and stuff like that, because you've never yourself, and apparently, if you're talking about the guy that just was involved, I guess he was a younger person, they've never really studied religion. One of the reasons that they have never studied religion is because most religions were never translated into local languages. So Islam, for example, the Quran is only available, well, not only, but it's preferred to be in Arabic. And that's the narrative that they have sold. You have to read it in Arabic. Why, I don't know. Why it was never translated into Urdu or Hindi or Turkish, I think they tried to do that. With Ataturk, didn't work. All right? I'm sure the same is true of Hindi or Christianity. That's not a problem. The third thing, you guys talked about why democracy doesn't work. The democracy doesn't work because you have elections every 5 years or 4 years or whatever it is. Democracy works if you enact, not enact, I'm sorry, if you, what's the word I'm looking for? Follow through on the laws that you have created. If you enforce the laws that you've created and you enforce them equitably and in a timely fashion.
Equitable is the operative word.
It is. That's why democracy doesn't work in India and Pakistan, because there is no enforcement of the law. Yeah, there are laws on the books, nobody
It
enforces
hasn't
them.
worked anywhere.
Yeah,
It
but
hasn't
no,
worked- it
no,
hasn't
you haven't,
worked
no,
here.
but over here, at least there is a little bit, there's a greater, enforcement.
No, but talk to native Indians, like a genocide.
Right, true. So it's not perfect, right? So just it's not perfect, right? But if you compare it, with India or Pakistan,
It was never designed to be equitable. It
then
is
that
by
depends on the
design.
people who are enforcing it, right? So yes, you're right. There are.
So I agree with Beena that it is an aspiration of people to really participate in decision making or decisions that affect their life. But liberal democracy was never designed for that.
But how do you
Right from its inception.
how do you translate that aspiration into action, Dispal?
We don't know, so we have to
No,
find
but you
ways.
do that by the law. This is the society.
No, but the law, you look at the laws developed after Westphalia in last 500 years. All those laws have been only in service of 1% elite.
That is
That's
so
why you
true.
need
You
that.
know, my son will always get faced with a different system of justice for a crime compared to a homeless person's son or a poor person's son. We just face a different police force, we face a different
Yes.
judiciary. Everybody on the death row in India is either a Dalit or a Muslim.
Yeah.
And over here you've got
And
blacks.
really
Yes.
poor.
Yes, but it's not a one size fits all answer, right? This is one of them. One of the options is the equitable enforcement of law. In my mind, I could be wrong. The other one,
No, but you are absolutely right. The point is, within the parameters of liberal democracy, it cannot happen.
Let's,
There also seems to be an assumption here that there is a fixed set of universal laws that have been given to us and has been given to every liberal democracy that we imperfectly enforce. That is not the case. Where are these laws coming from, really? Who are forming these laws? And which is why the whole structure and the subsequent enforcement of it varies so madly from society to society and country to country.
well, so the problem is, well, I'm not going to say problem,
So,
but
sorry, I just wanted to, because we just have a few minutes left, I just wanted to go around the room so some people who haven't said it have a chance to speak if they'd like to just say anything about any of this or to ask Sanjay anything.
I just want to make one point about people on death row. Since 1947, only 3 Brahmins have been executed. And 2
and
of
there are
them
3 Brahmins to men.
and 2
There's
of
3
them
people to
were the
men.
guys who killed Gandhi. So if you're a Brahmin in India, you have to kill a Mahatma Gandhi to be executed by state. Everybody else is either a Dalit or a Muslim or a Sikh.
And in Pakistan, everybody on death row is poor. So this is
And these people are also poor. Each one of them
Yeah.
is desperately poor. Desperately.
And it's no coincidence that only Dalits and Muslims are poor. It's a design.
Exactly.
So
Sorry.
I have this thought, but maybe we have adopted the Western liberal democracy, which I don't think is a problem with the system, that what you call the system. I think the issue is with, at the end of the day, how you translate that into how it affects the lives of people. So I think and that is the only thing that really matters with any system. But I think in the context of South Asia as a whole, as a Pakistani, what I feel is that we have an identity crisis. And I think that flows partly from the partition. I don't think we want to face up to the violence that we've inherited. I do believe that, I agree with that entirely. B, it is just so much easier to be us and them than look inside ourselves. And the third thing is, I somehow feel that we're very ashamed of our own South Asian heritage and history. And I think that lack of identity with who we are as a people has really led to conflict, because that conflict keeps you distracted. And I think, I don't know how you would address that in your comedy, but I think a huge lesson that we need to learn, in Pakistan especially, is that you have to be comfortable in your own skin and who you are, and then learn to live with what you
You
have.
made a very important point that we are ashamed of our identity.
Yes,
Right? You know, I think we should be ashamed of what we have done.
Now, yes.
What we have done historically, what we have done to ourselves. Like, I'm not just talking about the partition. Even before that, there is a lot to be ashamed of. We have no contribution. There is no contribution that we have made to scientific world. There is no contribution that we have made to modern political thought. There is no contribution that we have made or given an economic model to the world. We practically have no contribution. What we have is, we want to, it's like what is happening in India, that we had everything in the Vedas. We had spaceships in the Vedas. I mean, really. And you want me to buy it. And then there is this prime. Yeah. हम दोनों शरीफ होकर खड़े हुए थे पी पाट के हमको
जर्मन से ले गया.
And then Rajputs, for example, Rajput community in India. I mean, Rajputs, they always say we are brave Rajputs.
Oh my God.
And the fact is, they are the only losers who have not won a single battle. And yet they call themselves brave. I told them we are brave losers. And so this film came Padmavati, and they created a hue and cry that this is hurting Rajputana pride. Actually, the film was celebrating Rajputana pride. They didn't even watch it, and they started doing that for.
But that's the typical, no? When they go after any sort of things, they don't read it, they don't watch it. It's the hype that is created, the emotional appeal.
The entire colonization of India initially, what was happening throughout? One brother is with the British, one brother is trying to do something else, trying to stab in the back, and so what are we proud of? I don't understand. I have my simple question, like Prime Minister said that we did the first plastic surgery of the world.
Yeah.
The trunk of Ganesha. You have seen Ganesha's picture. This is an example of the plastic surgery. This is the first plastic surgery of the world, and I was amused. I said, I agree this is the first plastic surgery, but at least you should have done it properly. So that people who wanted to come, they would come to you. The moral of the story is never do such surgeries while you are high. Like, if you had spaceships in those days, then why did you invent a bicycle?
But then you see, you have to come to terms with what we are in order to move on from that. We keep glorifying what we have not done even, and I think that is for me the shame, that the fact that we think we're better, and this is
I want to, sorry,
Sorry, go on.
I just want to say, I want us to define who this we is. You know, we are sitting here, I find a lot to be proud of. If you look at everyday ingenuity of people, the creativity, look at Indian handicraft, look at the kind of things they produce, it is things to be proud of.
Yeah,
but we keep our sights on those who are the most bankrupt culturally, in every other way. And that's who, when we say we, that's who we are aligning with, which is quite, I mean, it's important for comedy, but in other words, it's important.
Actually making a very valid point. What you are saying is perfectly acceptable, and I'm happy you brought that up.
Yeah.
The person who's saying that Ganesha's trunk was the first plastic surgery should say what you are saying.
Yeah, that is what is.
No. I'm just, even when we sit here, we are so consumed with the problems of the 1% or maybe 5%, but we lose sight of the extraordinary, contribution that everyday people make. And you were talking about science and technology. If one looks at this thing of ancient steel making in India, it's extraordinary. The Damascus steel actually came from India. If you look at the handicrafts that were there, you look at the architecture, you look at common people's knowledge, it is extraordinary. So there's a lot to be proud of.
The moron who's coming out and claiming we had spaceship in Veda doesn't
I know
about this.
Of course, those have to be completely challenged and ridiculed.
So my problem is that we have these things. Why are you saying all this nonsense and making us a laughing stock?
Exactly. So our counter should be to bring out the knowledges of the people.
I
And,
think
you know, in
if
some
we
ways.
don't have to go that far, if we look just in the last century, just one person, Premchand's work is so much to be proud of,
Absolutely.
right? But look, nobody talks about him.
But then we have to, like Abbas saying, you know, you can't, but what's happening is that we get so consumed by the narrative that is being created by people that we are trying to counter in so many ways. But what we have to do, rather than trying to counter their ridiculousness, to actually uphold the things that really need to talk about that.
ठीक है कर रहे हो?
क्या?
Notes बना रहे
It's a आदत है.
Yeah,
Compulsory.
see, they set the agenda and then everybody sort of follows it, rather than we
So
set.
we have to set our own agenda, and rather than being
Actually,
reactive,
that's why they're succeeding.
Yes.
You know, they are setting up the agenda and we're reacting to that.
Yeah.
but we have to not react. Na? तो अपना फिर, you know,
We have to
you
do our
we
own
are
work.
going to be proactive, and being proactive. It's now few minutes to 6, and I know that you have another thing as well. So if anybody has anything else to say.
When actually in this discussion everybody contributed, so it's not that I can ask
No,
questions.
he has
also.
said nothing wrong. पूछो ना. Nobody better. I even said.
He already said that they are morons, so if morons are talking 1,000 years old thing, he should be talking, if he's president or prime minister, he should be talking what's going on today. इतनी डिस्पैरिटी है, इकोनॉमिक डिस्पैरिटी, उसके बारे में बात
नहीं
करनी है
करते।
कि तुम्हारे सदियों पुराना जो हो गया इतिहास को क्या
उसका क्या
करोगे?
झाड़ डालें क्या बैठ के?
हाँ, तो moron is moron.